How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to 2A News Now. I hope everybody's doing well, and I appreciate everybody that takes time watching my videos. What else is new? The ATF is at it again. The ATF raided a home of an 81-year-old Missouri man and seized nearly 200 firearms that were in his collection, and also seized 16,000 rounds of ammunition. Actually, in this story, the ATF raided two different homes of elderly men in Missouri. One, an 81-year-old man, another, a 75-year-old man. And they were both indicted by federal grand juries. And both men were arrested for selling firearms without a license. And according to the indictment that was released this week, 81-year-old Aubrey Foxbury, who lived in California, Missouri. And the ATF claims he did this between the dates of June 2nd, 2023 and September 9th, 2024. And as you can see, it's all during the Biden administration. Now, they don't say in the indictments how many firearms he's accused of selling without a license. The other thing they charge 81-year-old Foxworthy with, he had a rifle with a barrel that was less than 16 inches. Oh my God, that's just horrible. And of course they say the firearm wasn't registered. They also arrested separately 75-year-old Philip Leroy Rains. He was also charged with dealing in firearms without a license between the dates of April 1st, 2023 and April 4th, 2024. And neither man had a FFL, as you can see by the ages of both the men. They're in the later years of their lives. But now each of them faces 5 years in federal prison and could face fines up to $250,000. Now that's just for not having an FFL. But also Mr. Foxworthy is facing another 10 years in jail and a fine up to $10,000. Because the ATF claimed one of the rifles was a short-barreled rifle. And it's horrible to think if Mr. Foxworthy is found guilty and gets the maximum penalty for both offenses, he would be 96 years old before he got out of jail. But also, as I mentioned earlier, not only could he go to jail for a long time, he was forced to turn over to the ATF his 197 firearm collection, as well as 16,000 rounds of ammunition. You can clearly see by the list that I'm going to put up on the screen in a little bit that Mr. Foxworthy is a lifelong collector. Even on the list of firearms the ATF seized, they wrote down that 4 of them were machine guns, but they weren't, because evidently there was no serial number, there was no manufacturer stamped on the firearms. So what we're finding out, when that happens, they just write them down as machine guns. What kind of crap is that? And listen to this. In Mr. Foxworthy's collection, he had 12 Winchester Model 94 rifles. And somebody looked up the serial numbers of all of those rifles. And one of them showed that it was made before 1896. I'm going to go ahead and put up on the screen the pages and pages of firearms and ammunition that the ATF seized from Mr. Foxworthy. So you can see how crazy it is for them to take away all of this man's collection. That's one hell of a collection, isn't it? And it's just ridiculous that the ATF is going to put all of these firearms away in a warehouse or a building somewhere, and they won't be taken care of. And we've all heard stories of firearms being confiscated before, and the ATF has had them for years. And a judge finally rules that the firearms need to be returned, so they come back rusty. They're missing parts, or they're straight out just missing, and end up in an ATF agent's collection. I'm pretty sure we've all seen it, where it's allowed where people can sell their firearms at a gun show that's a personal collection. Or in your state, you're allowed to sell firearms at a flea market. And there's an older guy, either at a gun show sitting at a table, actually selling part of his collection, as well as an older guy at a flea market, who usually has a pickup truck and selling his collection out of the bed of his truck or out of the trunk of a car. And if it's legal in those states, there's no crime committed. The people selling them had no criminal intent whatsoever. But of course, a lot of that stopped because during the Biden administration, the ATF put out the engaged in business rule. And if somebody just sold one firearm and made a profit, someone would need to have an FFL to do so. And former attorney Merrick Garland said at the time when this rule came out, under this regulation, it will not matter if guns are sold on the internet, at a gun show, or at a brick and mortar store. If you sell guns to predominantly earn a profit, you must be licensed and you must conduct a background check. But of course the ATF took it too far. And like I said, if you just sold one firearm and made a profit, they very well might come after you. And like I said earlier, in the indictment, they don't say how many firearms these two guys are accused of selling without a license. But here's my guess. It's probably just a handful here and there. And it's because they're selling part of their collection. Especially Mr. Foxworthy, that's 81 years old, that has almost 200 firearms in his collection. Do they really think he's buying more firearms and turning around and selling them? I doubt it very much. And of course the ATF have rules, and there's laws against certain things. But arresting two guys, one that's 81 years old, one that's 75 years old, and confiscating all of the firearms and ammunition, does that help with crime? It's not like they're gangbangers in Chicago or other cities that they have Glocks with Glock switches on them and 30-round stick mags or drum mags shooting up the neighborhood. And it's times like this Pam Bondi needs to step in and take a look at these two cases and find out the truth, what exactly happened. And if it was a case that these guys were just selling off part of their collection, President Trump should give them a full pardon, and the ATF should be ordered to return all the firearms and ammunition to these guys. I would really like to know your thoughts about the situation. Should they drop the charges and return the firearms and ammunition to these guys? And as always, I appreciate everybody that supports the channel, especially the people, after watching every one of my videos, who like, share, and subscribe and hit those post notifications, as well as those people who leave really nice comments. I really do appreciate it. And I invite all of you to come back and watch my next video.